Purdue versus Kentucky is tomorrow. Is there more to that matchup than people expect?
You are Locked On Boilermakers, your daily podcast on the Purdue Boilermakers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On crossover here between Locked On Kentucky and Locked On Boilermakers. Lance and Nick hanging out here with you, talking Kentucky versus Purdue, a top 10 preseason exhibition. Could not be more fired up for this one. And if you look on KenPom, this is a top 5 matchup between number 3 and number 4. Really excited to preview this matchup here with you, Nick. And I just want to go ahead and start off right off the bat talking about this Boilermakers team. It's the best in the country, at least in my mind. It's the best in the country according to the AP. Kind of what are your expectations for this game briefly, and then talk about what the expectations are for the season? I'm curious.
Yeah, so for this game, for this exhibition, it's one that I'm extremely excited about personally at the start of college basketball season. I'm here for it. Purdue, this is a team with a ton of expectations this year. They're the favorites in the betting markets to win the national championship, and that really has come onto the fan base where everybody kind of has that championship or bust mentality going into the season this year. The players, Coach Matt Painter, everybody has that mentality where this is a year where we want that national championship, and they absolutely have the roster to do it. You brought up KenPom, Purdue. They're number 1 in KenPom, and defense a little bit lower. I do think that Purdue, they're a bit underrated on the defensive side of the ball this year, but offensively, they're going to blow most teams out of the gym. A plethora of three-point shooters that are absolutely elite. They can space the floor with Fletcher Loyer really well. They have the favorite for National Player of the Year in Braden Smith, who's trying to get out his senior campaign with a bang. There's a lot of talent on this Purdue roster this year. We can talk all episode long about it, but I know Kentucky's good. Lance, where do you see the Wildcats going in this matchup?
Man, I'll tell you, the big thing here for Kentucky is obviously they're down Jalan Lowe and Jayden Quaintance, their starting point guard, and what many would assume to be at some point this season they're starting a center. The problem for Kentucky in this one is kind of what we were talking about before we started recording, is to how seriously are they going to take this in terms of rotations, X's and O's. What type of offense are we going to see from both of these teams? Like, how serious are we going to get here? Because Mark Pope's been saying, hey, this is kind of a spot where we can experiment. Jalan Lowe, who now won't be playing in this game, was saying, nah, forget that. We're going out there to try and win. So he's not out there. So I guess he can't speak for the rest of the team here. But yeah, I think that this is a very good opportunity for two of the best teams in the country to kind of test each other a little bit. I think in the areas where they might potentially be weak, or at least they think that they're weak heading into this one. I'm really excited to kind of break down matchups wise what both of these teams are able to do on defense. But I think for Purdue, and I would assume you agree with this, Nick, a lot of what they are trying to improve on defensively is revolving around the rim. Last season, one of the worst rim defense teams in the country, bottom in the Big Ten. It was almost like it was over 58% in conference play that they were allowing inside the arc or something like that. They're trying to improve that this season. You say they're underrated. Talk to me a little bit about this center rotation. You've got Clough, you've got Jacobson, if I'm not mistaken. Kind of tell me what we're expecting out of those two guys, and then defensively what they can do to contribute.
Yeah, from a context perspective, when you're kind of looking at Purdue's front court, you have to realize that Zach Edey, he was at Purdue and you really didn't have to worry about the front court for quite a few years because that was a National Player of the Year that got it done inside. So last year, Edey moves on, and that is the question mark. You bring in a freshman and 7'4" Daniel Jacobson, who you think he may be a guy who can start for you, and then he breaks his leg second game in the year. He's out all year, and then you have to move Trey Kaufman-Renn to that center spot where he is traditionally a power forward. He averaged 20 points, but having to guard a center like that for TKR, you would prefer him not to. You would prefer him be more offensively focused, which you can't really do when you're focused on guarding Big Ten sitters. So you bring in Oscar Clough, one of the best rebounders in the transfer portal from South Dakota State this offseason, and you get Daniel Jacobson healthy again. Daniel Jacobson, he's more of a lanky rim protector who can really get it done inside, and Clough, not as great of a rim protector, but he can rebound the ball. So I don't know if there will be a starter one. I think it's more of a 1A, 1B type situation with these two guys where I don't see one getting 30 minutes, one getting 10, but I could see maybe a 25, 15-minute rotation between those two guys where they really play the best when they play together because they really complement each other in that front court.
Yeah, I am curious to see kind of how Painter wants to kind of mix and match these guys, and I think that it does speak positively to what the Boilermakers might do on defense in this game, sliding Kaufman Wren up to his natural position, letting Cuff and Jacobson kind of control what they can down low. If you will, a little bit more here, talk a little bit about Oscar Clough, because this is a guy I was talking about in mid-January earlier this year in the middle of the season saying, look, I don't know if he's going to enter the portal, but this is a guy you need to keep an eye on because statistically he's dominant in so many different categories. Like you mentioned, one of the best rebounders in the country, led the nation in defensive rebounding percentage. Really solid in terms of assist rate for a guy of his size. He also very efficient, did a good job drawing fouls. I mean, everything that you could possibly want out of a big man. Again, like you mentioned, not the most elite defensively, but just kind of tell me what you expect out of Clough this year, because this is a guy that I was super fired up about almost a year ago.
Yeah, so the thing with Oscar Clough is he may not have been the highest rated guy coming out of the transfer portal, but when you think about what Purdue needed after getting beat in the Sweet 16 by Houston, it was an incredibly intentional decision to get Oscar Clough because that was the only thing missing for Purdue last year. They were very close to beating Houston in a Sweet 16 and then taking on Tennessee, who we historically have done a good job against in March for a chance to go to another Final Four. So Purdue wasn't that far off last year, and what a lot of people said was a rebuilding year. They just didn't have the front court depth. They couldn't rebound at a level that they needed to in order to have success in March. You have that intentionality in the transfer portal for Matt Painter. You get the number one rebounder. I'll say that. We can say potential, but I do believe he's the number one rebounder in that portal because he's extremely talented. On the offensive side of the ball, in the pick and roll is where he's going to be the best at because this dude is huge. He's burly. For Braden Smith, he's had a really good connection, setting picks, and then letting Braden Smith do the work. That's something that we've seen. We've seen, obviously, from a rebounding perspective, getting more possessions for the Boilermakers. There's so much that this guy Clough has to offer, and I'm sure that we'll see that in the exhibition match. It's all about giving him opportunities to work within this Purdue offense because I really do think that he's a game changer for where this team's going to go this year.
I know we might not see either of these teams, again, trade blows as hard as they possibly can, but what do you think is the biggest strength of this Purdue team, and what do you think will show through kind of in this contest in terms of what the Boilermakers are bringing strength-wise?
I must say it's the three-point shooting ability. I think that Purdue will be the best shooting team in the nation this year, but something that I want to see is how they shoot on the road because last year, Purdue shot lights out at Mackey. That's something that's going to continue. Their best shooter, Fletcher Lawyer, he shot over 50% at home, not as well on the road. So for Purdue, you have plenty of shooters. You bring in freshman Omir Meyer. He was overseas last year playing. He's 18 years old, but is a potential lottery guy next year. He can shoot the three ball lights out. You have Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, all these guys that are going to be great this year shooting the ball. But I want to see, can you shoot in an environment like Rupp, where all those Kentucky fans, they're not going to give you momentum. Yes, you're going to be able to ride that momentum in Mackey, but you have plenty of tough games on the road this year. And I think it's a great test for your shooting ability to stay consistent on the road in an environment in October at Rupp.
It's going to be a very, very tough test, I think, for Purdue because of that road environment. Let's talk a little bit about the home team here, the Wildcats, in just a second, right here on this crossover edition of Locked On Kentucky and Locked On Boilermakers. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Quo, formerly Open Phone. It's one of the tools that makes a huge difference for business owners. It's Quo. It's formerly Open Phone. It's the same great business phone system you've heard me talk about before, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table, and every customer conversation counts. You need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7, and Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or computer, so there's no more carrying two phones or relying on a landline. I love how Quo lets your team share one number and collaborate on all calls and text like a shared inbox, so no customer gets left hanging. In their built-in AI agent is a game changer. It can answer after-hours calls, capture leads, and keep businesses moving even when you're off the clock. See why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly Open Phone, and get started free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. That's QUO.com/lockedoncollege. You can even keep your existing number for free. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss, because right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if they win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I really love how FanDuel gives me a ton of different ways to play, whether it's parlays, player props, or even following the live matches during games. And I use it mostly to keep track of my fantasy lineup. It kind of keeps me engaged on Sundays, makes watching football even more exciting when I've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or you really like diving into the stats like I do, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. All right, continuing along here on this crossover edition of Locked On Kentucky and Locked On Boilermakers, Lance and Nick hanging out here with you. We talked about Purdue, about their strengths, about their lineup. It is going to be a very, very good team that marches into Rupp Arena this Friday. It's going to be at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern, I believe on SEC Network Plus. So go ahead and get your ESPN Plus subscriptions ready if you have not. It's going to be a big-time matchup, preseason exhibition game. I kind of wish this game was not a preseason exhibition, but at the same time, for the sake of the Wildcats, I'm kind of glad it is at the same time, because you don't have your starting point guard, your starting center. You're the one of, if not the best defenders in the nation in Jayden Quaintance. So I'm curious, though, Nick. I'm very curious to see just how much of a fight Kentucky puts up without those two guys.
Yeah, you hit on it. Absolutely. What some people don't realize about Jayden Quaintance for you guys is that he was actually committed to Kentucky initially under John Calipari. He decommits after Mark Pope comes over, but he's back in looking at Kentucky, doing some scouting on this team. I just had to notice that Jayden Quaintance is going to be incredibly important for you guys this year. It's going to be a bit of a two-parted question I have to ask you, but Quaintance not available in this matchup. You guys still have guys like Brandon Garrison, a new 7-footer, and Reese Potter. So you guys definitely still have options, but how does that affect Kentucky's approach going into this matchup? Who are you guys going to rotate in at that big man position? And then once Quaintance gets healthy, how do you see him playing? Do you see him being a power forward, or how do you see him playing alongside Brandon Garrison?
That second question is a very fun question, and one that we've been kind of debating throughout the course of this offseason. But the first one here, as far as what Kentucky is going to do at that 5 spot, Brandon Garrison's going to start in this game. Well, curious to see what the minutes rotation looks like between him and then the second guy I think that's going to be coming off the bench in Malachi Marino, the 5-star freshman. I am a little bit skeptical about putting him in a spot like this against one of the best front courts in the nation, and TKR and Clough, and then Jacobson obviously coming off the bench for Purdue. I'm a little curious to see what Marino does here. I think he's a very high floor guy that I think in a year or so could develop into something very valuable for UK. Reports out of practice have been nothing but incredible just about him defensively, about how he's plugging into the system very well. But I think this is going to be, for the most part, the Brandon Garrison show in terms of who's the most impactful at the 5. And then I do think Reese Potter, the transfer from Miami, will get in spots here in this contest. I just think that Marino is probably going to take most of the backup minutes, if I had to guess. That's what Kentucky's going to try and do. Am I sitting here telling you that's something that I'm uber confident in, both Garrison and Marino against, again, Purdue? I'm not sitting here telling you that I necessarily am, just because of how good Purdue is offensively. And then when Jayden Quaintance comes back, that is the question, Nick. What on earth does Kentucky do with JQ? Because to be honest with you, I think that Jayden Quaintance possesses the ability, I think, to slide up to the 4, but is he the most comfortable there? And is that where Kentucky is going to want him? I'm not exactly sure. I think that what they're going to do is they're going to split time between BG and JQ at that 5 spot and just let it be a, hey, we're splitting minutes thing here. I'm sure Big Blue Nation is not really fired up about that. In fact, a lot of people have said if that's the case, they're going to be very upset because they want to see JQ play as much as possible. But that would be the alternative, is if you wanted to maximize what he does as a player, especially on the defensive end, and then also unlock a little bit of that versatility, you'd play him at the 4. But right now, I think that Quaintance would be somebody that splits time, and because that's kind of what Pope's MO has been, is give everybody as many minutes as possible.
Yeah, this exhibition, it's certainly going to be fun. But from a Purdue perspective, in the past, Coach Matt Painter, he hasn't necessarily taken these exhibition matches as important as some would think in terms of wanting to get wins. He's focused more on playing hard, developing your guys, but focusing on 6 through 12 guys that are trying to crack the rotation, get minutes, instead of maybe your starters that have already cemented themselves into this starting lineup. So it's hard to tell how important a win or loss is in terms of what this game's going to mean. For Kentucky, what's the mentality for Mark Pope, who's already seen 2 of his top guys get hurt this year before the season has started? How serious is Kentucky going to take this exhibition match? Are they going to try to get the win? What is your expectation for this team on Friday?
Yeah, I talked about it last week because Pope did mention, I mentioned it a little bit ago, about how he said this is going to be an opportunity to kind of go out there and experiment and learn a lot of things about the team. And he specifically said, we're probably going to see a lot of really boneheaded, dumb mistakes from this team. And you're going to go, oh my gosh, how on earth could they be doing X, Y, Z? And then you're probably going to see some really incredible highlights without Jalen Lowe and Jayden Quaintance. So I think it's just going to be kind of a feeling out process for Mark Pope. I guess that's where he's at mentally. Obviously, you want to go into any kind of contest and saying, well, the goal is to go out there and try and win. But at the same time, I did talk about this last week. I do think that those ideas kind of butt heads here a little bit, especially with your top point guard and your top center out with, okay, we're going to experiment and try and do some weird stuff and see if it works out. And, oh, yeah, we're going out there to win. I think those ideas kind of clash a little bit. So if the head man is saying, hey, we're going to experiment, then obviously I think we're going to experiment. And honestly, for you and I, this might end up being more fun than anything because we get to really dive into, okay, learning more about what our teams are going to be for the rest of the season. So I think it's not laid back. I don't think the environment is going to allow for that. But as far as mentality goes for this coaching staff and how they want to execute in this game, I do think it is going to be less of a, okay, we're going to find out what our X's and O's look like, and more about what our Jimmies and Joes look like. Like you mentioned, 6 through 12, we're going to find out if Jasper Johnson can be anything more than a spot up scorer for Kentucky this season. If he has that ball handling and a little bit of that playmaking, we're going to find out if Mo Diabate can guard Trey Kaufman-Renn, one of the best scorers in the country at that 4 spot. We're going to find out about Andrea Yelovich, if whether or not he can be somebody that's more versatile than maybe what reports are saying about him at the beginning of the year. Can Brandon Garrison take the next step defensively? Can this team play with the pace that they did a season ago without some of the guys that were really important on the perimeter? There's going to be a lot to find out about this team. So maybe a little bit more laid back at various points in this contest in terms of experimentation. But I also think at the same time, Kentucky's probably going to throw out they're going to throw out some different interesting punches, and you will see some wow moments. You'll see some dumb mistakes as well.
All right. And then, Lance, a matchup that I wanted to see when I circled this matchup when it was announced was Jalen Lowe and Braden Smith, because those are 2 of the best point guards in the nation. I would say Braden Smith is the best. I don't know if there's really a comparison. I think Jalen Lowe is one of the most underrated point guards in the nation. Unfortunately, Lowe does go down in the blue and the white game. Who's next up for Kentucky at that point guard position? And what is your expectation for, are they going to be able to handle the firepower in an All-American player like Braden Smith?
I think that there are 2 different ways that you can look at this. You can say, okay, your offensive engine is out and you have to go to a secondary playmaker at best in Denzel Aberdeen. That's the answer to the first part of the question, is who is going to step up. I think it's going to primarily be the Florida transfer, Denzel Aberdeen. But you kind of give up some of that ball handling, that athleticism, that speed, I should say, instead of athleticism, and just that natural point guard ability. So I think you give some stuff up offensively, but at the same time, you could also look at it and say, Jalen Lowe was not that good of a defender on ball last season. Sure, he got a couple of steals per game. You go look at advanced analytics and say, look at his defensive rating, go actually watch the kid against some players like Braden Smith, and okay, we start to see some struggles despite him giving it his best effort. Aberdeen is 6'5" and I think has a little bit more muscle and a little bit more strength and is able to guard a little bit more effectively than maybe Lowe could. Is he going to be able to handle Braden Smith? No, I don't think anybody in the country can. But is it going to be a little bit better? Yes. So I think that you can look at it two different ways and say, okay, kind of lose some stuff on offense, but at the same time, maybe you guard a little bit more effectively. So it's going to be Aberdeen. Then, like I mentioned, also Jasper Johnson. I think he is going to get his touches in this game, maybe a little bit more than we expect now that we're starting to look at this more of as an experiment than an actual contest. And then the final guy here, Colin Chandler, heading into his sophomore season. I think he's also going to get a little bit of run at point as well, just a little bit, just to see if he can actually handle the ball better than he did a season ago, I will say.
All right, Lance, I'm excited to talk matchups here in this next segment. Anything left for you?
No, I am actually really interested to talk matchups because there's a couple of important players that we have not even mentioned yet this episode. So I'm really curious to see kind of where this final conversation takes us. We'll talk predictions, we'll talk matchups, we'll talk stats, all that good stuff here in just a second, right here on this crossover edition of Locked On Kentucky and Locked On Boilermakers. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. They deliver confidence with every ride with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details, and Mazda brings this same intention how they craft every single model. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, let's wrap this puppy up. Lance and Nick hanging out here with you in this crossover edition of Locked On Kentucky and Locked On Boilermakers. I'm I'm still trying to wrap my mind around the fact that we get this kind of game this early in the season. And the best part about it is that we can turn to our fan base, barring no one getting injured, knock on wood, we can turn to our fan bases and say, man, it doesn't matter. Whether if you lose by 30, okay, cool. We'll get up off the mat. We'll go and we'll play our first games. I'm assuming y'all will be playing a cupcake. I believe we play, I want to say Nichols to open the season, then Valpo before we get Louisville. This one's going to be really
Oakland.
fun. You play Oakland.
Y'all are familiar with.
No, we don't have to bring them up. Oh my goodness. Is the head coach still currently there?
Yeah,
actually,
yeah, he's there. He's there. Man. He said they play a tough stretch. It's us and then two other really tough games. He said he's winning one of them.
Really?
Okay. They're like 200 in KenPom.
We will see. Oh my gosh, it is Michigan, Purdue, Houston.
Yeah,
and then they play a non-D1 team named Defiance, which is kind of awesome. Anyway, let's talk matchups. Let's give our predictions here, Nick. Let's start at the top. I don't expect any sort of pushback from you here as far as point guard goes. Braden Smith is objectively the best point guard in the country, might be the best player in the nation, could be able to operate when he is in the game as effectively as he wants to, right?
Yeah, I think that we'll see Braden Smith. I don't know if we'll see him as much as people want to see Braden Smith, just because you got to preserve the health in this exhibition match. But I think that when we see him, we're certainly going to see him, because this year is a new evolution of Braden Smith. Last year, he had 313 assists. This year, he needs 318 to break the all-time leading assist record in history. So he honestly, throughout the offseason, has really developed as a playmaker. During some of the intra-squad scrimmages, he's been averaging like 12 points, 10 assists, whereas maybe last year, more of like 16 and 6. So just a different evolution of Braden Smith. I think he'll be very prevalent as a playmaker in this matchup. But like I said, it just depends how much we're going to see this guy.
And I guess that is a huge question, because if we're talking about who's going to win this game, if Smith is not out there for an extended period of time, maybe Kentucky tries to create an advantage with some of the guys that they have backing up here at the point, like Aberdeen, like Jasper, etc. So walk me through this, because I've not been able to get like a definitive answer as to who the 2 and the 3 are going to be. For Purdue, is it Lawyer or is it Mayer that's going to be at the 2?
Okay, so it's a bit confusing. So Fletcher Lawyer, 100% starting. That's been guaranteed for 2 years now.
Okay.
But Jakari Harris and CJ Cox are the guys that are really kind of in competition for that 3 spot. There is a situation where you can move Lawyer over to the 3 and maybe a Cox or a Harris fills in at the 2. But what I expect to happen, is that Jakari Harris will fill in at the 3 spot. He's a little bit bigger than CJ Cox. I think that Meyer is best for you coming off the bench, being a spark, because he's a guy that you're going to want to have the ball in his hand. So I like him coming in whenever Braden Smith's not on the floor, kind of commanding that offense. But I see Jakari Harris or CJ Cox filling in alongside Fletcher Lawyer in that starting lineup.
Interesting. Okay, I did not get a full grasp on exactly what Purdue was going to do on the wing there, but yeah. Fletcher Lawyer, one of the best shooters in the nation, obviously, going up against what will likely be Otega Owe here at that shooting guard spot. That's a really interesting matchup because both these guys get their points in, I think, completely different ways. It feels like Lawyer more of a catch and shoot guy, Owe more of a get him the ball and get out of the way, driving downhill type guy. How do you see this matchup going? Defensively, I think for both these guys, it's very interesting.
Yeah, so I brought up Cox and Harris just a minute ago, talking about who may potentially start at that 2 or the 3 spot. I don't think Fletcher Lawyer is going to guard Otega Owe. I think that you want him off of Owe as much as you can. Love Fletcher Lawyer, love who he is as a player, but I do think when you're talking about a point of attack defender or just guys that can flat out guard Jakari Harris and CJ Cox, a little bit of a better option. Still very young, sophomore guards, but if they can really develop as defenders, I think that you look to this exhibition matchup as who defends Otega Owe best. Well, that guy can fill in because we need somebody at that spot to guard Big Ten wings going into the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is the most interesting unknown as far as kind of what both Kentucky and Purdue are going to be doing there defensively at the very least. At the 4, this is a matchup that I feel like heavily favors TKR. At the same time, Kentucky brought in Mohamed Diabate to do one thing really well, and that's play his tail off on defense. Kentucky doesn't really have a great answer for TKR outside of Diabate, which is a little concerning. So do you feel like TKR is kind of going to be able to get his in this contest, or do you think it's going to be a little bit more difficult than that?
I think it'll be difficult. I really like what you guys have got in that front court. I think it'll certainly be difficult. However, I do think it'll be interesting to see. This will really be the first look at TK alongside whether it be Jacobson or Clough, who he's playing alongside. So that's what I think will be more interesting than matchup on matchup Kentucky versus Purdue is really how TK, he really plays with those guys that he didn't have the luxury of playing with last year. So that's something that I feel like we can look at and say, hey, this is a guy that averaged 20 last year. What can he do when he's not having to guard the other team's main center?
Yeah, I'm very curious to see that as well. And then the last one, we've already touched on this quite a good bit. I like what Purdue has in the front court. I don't know if you guys can tell based on my tone throughout the course of this episode. I think Kentucky's going to have some struggles defensively in this one against this plethora of really, really strong front court guys that Purdue has. Any other notes here on Clough, Jacobson, Garrison, Marino, etc.?
I mean, I just think it's very interesting, kind of the matchups. There's so many because there's so many different pieces that are going to rotate in and out. And that's kind of the excitement of one of these exhibitions. Yes, it doesn't count, but just from a talent evaluation standpoint, getting to see all these guys match up, like Moreno matching up against Jacobson. You got Clough matching up on Garrison. Matchups that you don't get if Purdue doesn't play Kentucky on October 24th. So I just think I'm so excited to see all these different guys get to work up against each other.
Final predictions here. I normally don't do a score on the show, but I would 1000% be willing to throw one out for fun if you've got one.
Yeah, you go first. I think it'll be high scoring, but I want you to kind of give me a baseline for where you think we're at.
Okay, so I don't think Kentucky's going to be able to stop anything in this game defensively. Okay. Just straight up. I think that they are going to struggle at various points. Purdue, not known as a big foul drawing team, but I think that if anything, that's what Kentucky is going to resort to with players like Smith is trying to put them on the line, or they're going to be overly aggressive defensively. And it's going to allow, I think, Purdue to kind of not necessarily score at will, but score at a pretty high rate. I think that pace is also something else to watch in this one. I think Purdue might play a little bit faster in this, just if I had to guess, just based on environment and opponent, but it won't be incredibly fast. I think it'll be enough to get them to 88. I think Kentucky will lose this game by somewhere between 8 to 10 points. I'll go 88-80 is my final score prediction here for the Wildcats. I think we'll see some good things. Maybe not so much on the defensive end. And then at the end of the day, it's just all about getting everybody healthy for the start of the season and your really big time non-con matchup. So that's my prediction.
Yeah, the way I view this one is in the past, Purdue, they haven't really put their starters out for these exhibition games. So they haven't won at the level that maybe you expect them to going into this one. But I think that this team's different. I think that you have more depth than you ever had. I think you have a fun opportunity to explore that depth against Kentucky. And with Kentucky's two top guys out at the point guard and at the center spot, I think that Purdue's in a good spot to win this game and get a good first win, although it doesn't count against Kentucky. I think Purdue's going to shoot the ball fairly well in this matchup. I still think that Kentucky is going to do a lot offensively, and Purdue's going to have stuff to work out. So I'm going to say 86-92 Purdue in this game.
Okay, I like it. I do think we see. I think we see some fireworks, man.
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to it. So that is our preview of Kentucky versus Purdue. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it. We're here, man. This season is starting. It has felt like the longest offseason of all time, especially compared to last year's for Kentucky at very least. Nick, thank you so much for joining me today. Tell everybody where they could find your stuff, man.
Of course. Yeah, we're Locked On Boilermakers. We just started up about 2 months ago, but with basketball season starting up now, it's starting to get hot. So make sure you check out Locked On Boilermakers daily Purdue content every single day.
And if you are a big college basketball head like I am, go subscribe to Locked On Purdue if you're listening to this on Locked On Kentucky. Nick absolutely deserves it. Crushing it out the gate here with Locked On. You can follow the show on Twitter for me at Locked On UK. Follow me on Twitter at Lance_. And you can subscribe if you're listening to this from the Purdue perspective. And maybe you want to get my thoughts after Purdue walks into Rupp and stuns the Cats, or maybe you want to come listen to what I have to say after Mark Pope and company top the Boilermakers. Who knows? We'll have to see. But Nick, again, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.